Hi guys, welcome back to my channel. Today I am finishing the series of all the curriculum choices that I've made for the upcoming 2022-2023 school year. And what I'm wrapping up with is like our family style learning. And so what do I mean by this? I mean, these are the subjects that I am teaching all four of my kids all at once. So if you have 4 kids or you have several kids, it can be really difficult to teach 4 different Bible studies, 4 different sciences, 4 different histories. You just don't have enough time to be able to sit and to do that with all of them. So one way to do that, a lot of people call it your morning basket time, your family style learning, whatever you want to call it. This is what I'm sharing today. And so let's go ahead and just get started. These are the things that I'm going to be teaching this upcoming year. I'm kind of excited about several of them actually because I'm changing up a few things. Some of them are going to be a little bit of a trial, and actually I think almost all of what I'm doing is a little different in some way, and I'm not gonna wait any longer. Let's just get started and I'll share with you what I have. Okay, first things first, one of the things I'm really excited about, and I've had to kind of hold myself back because I've wanted to get started, but we're just wrapping up another thing that we're doing for Bible, and so I'm like chomping at the bit to get started. So a lot of you have probably seen a lot of things about not consumed ministries, and this is one of those things that I had seen and I had a lot of friends using, and I thought, okay, I'm just gonna go ahead and try it. Well, this is something new that they have, and so this is what we're gonna be using for our Bible time, and we are using the Faithpedia. And so actually when you get it, it can be set up so it can just sit on your table like this. So you could keep it on your homeschool table, you could keep it on your kitchen table, wherever you're doing your school. It can just sit out and be ready to go. So what I like about this is that there's 2 different versions, not versions, but you can do Old Testament and you can do New Testament. And we actually just went ahead and ordered both so that we would have them and we can be ready to move into the next. And another thing that I like with it is that it comes with little journals. Actually, it doesn't come with, you do have to order them separately, but you can order the little journals that come with it. I have 2 different kinds. I have one for each kid. The older, the 3 boys all have just the standard one, and then I got a primary version for Eden, so a little bit younger. I think instead of a lot of writing, it has a little bit more drawing prompts. But some of the things, and if you want a greater and more in-depth look into this, drop a comment below, let me know. I can make a video. I don't want to spend too much time going into it, but it does break it up. You've got all these little labels right here, and it says God's book, God's world, God's character, God's stories, and God's timeline. And so each, as you're going through them, they each kind of focus on a little different of a thing. So I'll just give you a glimpse of what they look like. These are just the daily themes. One, you have a timeline here of the Old Testament as to what you're doing in that week. And then here you're looking at Genesis. So this is God's book. So you're taking a little bit more in-depth look at the book of Genesis, when it was written, the purpose, the theme, the author. Then you move into God's words, and so we're looking at the word covenant. So what does that mean? Where are you finding it? The next is God's character. So he is a covenant keeper. So that is part of God's character, that he is a covenant keeper. Obviously has some other things that you can read along with your kids, but each of these is sectioned out to be a day. Then here, God's stories. So you've got the rainbow covenant, obviously talking about the flood and the rainbow. And then here we have another timeline. So we're going through, and I want to say I must have either missed it, I must have flipped 2 pages because I've seen it in here. Let me see if I can find one. If I can get there. They also, like, here's an example where they have a spotlight on a particular person. So Darlene Diebler Rose. And so that's God's stories. We're showing God moving through the lives of people. And so that's what this little, kind of, I don't know, what would you call this? Like little trifold thing that sits up on your table. That's what that looks like. And that's what I'll be reading and going over with the kids. So super excited about that for Bible. That again is the Faithpedia from Not Consumed. Now, this is kind of a bridge. The next thing that I want to share is a bridge a little bit between Bible and history. And so also from Not Consumed. I'd seen this for a while. I haven't exactly figured out how I'm squeezing this in. It might be that we do traditional history, 3 days a week, and we do this kind of history 2 days a week. I'm not exactly sure. I haven't figured out the nitty-gritty, but I knew that I wanted to incorporate this into our history/Bible. And so this is To Every Nation, and it is a study on 12 different missionaries and their great God. And so if I show you here, one, so like here, Eric Liddell. So it has a biography about him on here. And then it kind of has this character trait down here that's talking about honor. And then it's going to cover a lot of things. Actually, it covers a little bit of geography. What is North China like today? What are the language they speak? Their religious beliefs, facts about the people. So how does this tie in? Like it does have some more worksheets, but this ties into because we're going to be reading these set, and it's a glare because I still haven't taken it out. I got the set, trying to get it there. These are the Christian heroes then and now. We have several of these and we've read them and they are really enjoyable. But I got them specifically the ones that I would need in order to go through this book. But this was one thing that I really wanted to pursue this year, was really talking about having strong faith. And then what better way to teach that to your kids other than studying great missionaries who have done amazing things for the Lord. So this is something that I'm also really excited to be incorporating. And that kind of bridges us over to our history. And so let's go ahead and look. One thing that we have already added into, this is something that I kind of added in mid to late year, and it's really short and simple, but it is the American Patriots Almanac. And this is just a daily reading of something historical that happened in the United States, that happened on that particular day. So it's broken down to, if I look just by date, right? So, and it's just one page for that day. And a lot of times while the kids are eating breakfast, I'm just reading this. We're reading it to see what happened on that day in history. There are certainly days that we don't do it, and I just go ahead and skip forward to the day that we're doing. I'm not real strict about it. We've just found some really cool and interesting things out of this one that it brings up a lot of great talking points, and like, oh, I didn't know that happened or whatever, or we are able to relate it to something else that we've been learning. And so this one is a fun one and really great for just having a little bit of American history thrown into it. Sometimes if we do have to skip a couple days, I'll rummage through and say, oh, if there's anything of particular importance or something that I think might really interest them, and I'll go ahead and read it too. So that is something that we have already done, but I've never shared it before, and so we will include this too in our mornings. Just one page, quick and easy to be able to do. Now, when I've talked about history before, that we do not do a traditional history book, and that continues to be the case this year. So we are continuing on using Classical Conversations, our 4th edition guide, as our guide. So since we travel, we are not part of an official Classical Conversations group, but we kept our guide and we use that as kind of what leads us into what we're studying. So we're kind of covering like medieval history. We're in cycle 2. If you are following Classical Conversations, we're in cycle 2. So it's like medieval, mid-century history. And so we are going to be, this is kind of like our spine, is the story of the world. Now, I've had these story of the world books for ages. I think probably when we started homeschooling, I was like, I have to have these. My kids were like 4 and 2. I didn't have to have them at that point. But nonetheless, I have them now. And we read the first one, which was Ancient History, last year, and we actually really enjoyed it. It was really good. The chapters are super short. You can break them up into, if you started here, if you were reading about Alfred the Great, and you just wanted something really short, it's 1, 2, I guess 3 pages. So you could break them down into really bite-sized chunks. So I use this as our spine, and we just kind of read through that to kind of keep us in gear with that time period. I also have the activity book. We have not used the activity book before, but I really wanted to make a push. Now, I'm not by no means going to be doing everything in it, but it does have some questions in it to be able to make sure that, just like comprehension questions, so I might just have it out in front of me, using it to make sure that they're getting it. I usually ask my own questions or have them recap it to me. Sometimes we will also use just a regular notebook where we're writing down some of the things that we learned about in the notebook. I usually have one notebook that covers science and history. So if we read something, they can either draw it, write about it, whatever. But this one has some maps in it, and I thought the maps might be helpful as far as, you know, drawing where things are going. I did notice that in this past year we had some holes or gaps with things like geography, so I got it with the hope of maybe having a little bit more accountability, I guess, with making sure that some of those things are sticking. But you guys know me. In talking with history, I can't talk about some of the read aloud. So I have just a few, okay, I have more than a few, if I'm honest. I got some books. So one of the things that I always like to look through is Half a Hundred Acre Wood. She has an amazing book list of like endless book options for that tie into classical conversations in each different cycle. And so I kind of went through and I picked and chose a few of the books that I wanted the kids that I'm either going to be reading aloud. So these are just going to be read aloud books, whether we're reading in the morning, before we go to bed, whatever it is that I'm going to be reading, trying to fit them loosely with the time period. And these are more like living books. They're not textbooks or anything. So they've got a story. Some of these I may not get to, and I may just be giving them to Gabriel to be his personal reading books. So I'll just show you some of those books. If you want a greater look into anything, I can show you. But this one, I Will Protect You. I actually had a friend recommend this book to me. This one is more, actually, I think I just grabbed this one for Gabriel to read. It wasn't so much as one I was planning on reading aloud, but it's Code Talker. And it's the story about the Navajo Marines of World War II. I'd actually been out in that area before and have seen some of like the museums and some of the things that they had from the Navajo Code Talkers. And I thought it was really cool. I thought this would be a fun book to read. Now, here are some books that will go along with the history. We have The Apprentice. We have Adam of the Road. I'm not sure. I think this one might have jumped into. I had it as a recommendation from a friend. I think I got this one for Gabriel to read as well. But the story of Eli Whitney, she said her sons had enjoyed it. This is another read aloud, The Candy Bomber, the story of the Berlin Airlift's chocolate pilot. So I've read a kid's book before of this story, and it's a cool idea, neat idea of something that happened during the World War II. So this one's a little bit lengthier, more than a picture book. So I thought we'd give this one a try. We have the Magna Charta, Sergeant York. Sorry guys with the glare. I'm sitting by a window and the light from the window is coming in. And The Great War. So this would be about World War I. We have, this one is a picture book that I grabbed. It's The Bobbin Girl. And let's see, we have a few other ones. Some of them I actually had already that we've read before. This one's a new one, Guts and Glory, The Vikings. And this one has some pictures in it. I haven't read this one before, so we'll see how that one goes. We have The Sword in the Tree, The Door in the Wall, The First World War. This is an Usborne book, kind of pictures and like more of like, I don't know, a tiny little history book. We have Trial and Triumph. We had this book before. We've read little pieces of it, but this one is stories of church history. And so it goes into like Polycarp or Constantine or let's see how Charlemagne, Alfred the Great, just from the early church through the Middle Ages. It goes through the Reformation, post-Reformation, modern missions, and then the recent times, just of people who have stood with Christ through the times. And then these were a couple of other books that I had found along the way. We have Eric the Red and Leif the Lucky. Obviously, we're going to be covering the Vikings, and then I obviously have the Delaire book, Leaf the Lucky, as well, which they always have some really cool illustrations in there. So some chapter books thrown in, some picture books thrown in, so to help cover history. And those will be in addition to obviously reading the story of the world. So that's what we have planned for history. So again, not a huge change in the way that we're doing it, but just new books, and obviously including in the American Patriots Almanac. Now, let's go ahead and move over to something a little different. So I've never really done, I have done geography before, but we have done it more in the sense of covering it with our co-op, where we would follow the sequence. We would draw the maps and we would do that. And we did that a lot more in our co-op, but since we're no longer part of it, I started realizing that while my kids have a pretty good idea of where things are, they know the continents, they know the oceans, that we did some hiking at one point, and we got to the top, and it had the actual coordinates of where we were on the top of the mountain. And all the kids were like, well, what are these numbers and what do they mean? And so it really started to make me aware of some of the holes and the gaps that maybe we had in geography. And so it led me to just looking up for something super simple. So I got this Evan Moore geography book, and you're gonna notice it's grade 5. And so my thought process is I was gonna go middle of the road. I've got a 3rd grader. I have a 1st grader. This is so a little bit more for the boys, a little less for Eden, and you'll see why in just a second. But I went middle of the road, and so we have I've got Ezra in 3rd, I've got Isaiah in 5th, and I've got Gabriel in 7th. Instead of going all the way to the top or all the way down low, we went middle of the road and we landed on 5th grade. And so what these are like daily readings and questions to go with it. So it's whether or not you're looking at a map and reading a couple of paragraphs, and then you have a couple of questions that you would answer based on that reading or the map. So instead of just using the one book or getting this one is $20-ish, depending on where you get it, about $20. But you can get these little daily geography practice. This is just a student practice book. So all it does not have the reading in them. These are just merely the worksheets where they answer the questions and do the exercises with the maps. And so I have one of each of these for the boys. So whether or not I sit down and I have my book, like I could use this one, and we can do where I'm gonna maybe read, these couple of paragraphs, or go over this vocab of what each of the different things mean. And then they'll each have their own little workbook where they're gonna answer the questions individually, just to have a little bit of accountability. Again, I just felt like when we started talking about that, I realized that there were just a few holes, gaps, things that we hadn't necessarily covered, that I thought this would be a good opportunity to throw it in. I don't know if my kids are we've never really been workbook people, but I thought that this would be, I can see at least a couple of them enjoying it, because it's super quick, short, easy, to the point. Like, go in, answer the 5 questions. When the 5 questions are done, you're done, and it doesn't have to drag on. So the quicker you do it, the quicker you're done. And so I can see them really enjoying it. And honestly, it's very quick. Like, you can see actually that if I hold this page up here, that Monday is really only 2 questions, Tuesday is only 2 questions, Wednesday is only 2 questions. So it's really short and sweet. So I don't think it's going to take a whole lot of time, but I did feel like it would maybe help us fill in those gaps of what I felt like we were missing. And that kind of leads us into science. So with science, we were still kind of following our foundations guide for classical conversations and doing some reading. And we really just wanted, again, a little bit more individualized. And here's the reason why. when I am sitting and reading the questions to my kids, I'm reading to them, and at the end I'm asking just some basic follow-up questions like what was this, what was that, what happened here. I have certain kids who will always answer, and I have certain kids who will never answer and will always allow the other kid to answer for them. And so I started realizing that if I ever wanted them to answer on their own, it was going to have to be in the form of something like this. So the same thing, we have a science book here where we have grade 5. Again, I went middle of the road. If Eden would like to sit and listen to any of this, more than happy to include her and let her listen. I didn't get a workbook for her to do. This is mainly focusing on Isaiah, Ezra, and Gabriel. And so we went middle of the road, again, level 5, and I got each of them their own little workbook. Now the workbooks are more like around $5 a piece, $5-6 a piece, but it's the same thing. These just have the daily reading and then like 1 or 2 questions at the bottom, maybe fill out a diagram, but they're going to be reading a paragraph and answer it. Now with that, I am pairing, and so they're going to be doing this more individually, and this is how I'm trying to work on them answering the questions and having a little bit more accountability to themselves. Because while we would read it and we would do it, maybe they would draw something in their science notebook, I always had one kid who was ready to answer all the questions, maybe 1 or 2. And then I had other kids who were like, what did you just read? I wasn't listening. And so I feel like this is really going to help make sure that each one is holding themselves accountable for getting their own work done and learning their own thing. This could be a complete and utter failure and bomb. I told you I've never done like a little workbook like this before. So we'll see, and I can keep you posted on how it goes. But in addition to that, while they're going to be doing that, I am using it as a guide to pull out my God's design books. So some of the science is dealing with ecosystems, and I've shared with these books before, but they're super short and sweet. So if I were doing a lesson about lakes and ponds, it's literally like 2 pages. And this is it's 3 pages. There's one more. But they're really short and sweet, 2 to 3 pages for each lesson. And this is what we were doing before. And so what I'm going to be doing is I'm going to be reading this, and then I'm going to make sure that my lesson corresponds to what their lesson is. So this is probably going to be going in a little bit more in depth into their study. And then this is just going to be making sure that they understood what we talked about and they're able to put their thoughts down, answer the questions correctly, do the diagram, fill in the blank, whatever the problem or the activity is for that lesson, just making sure that they're holding themselves accountable and learning the material themselves. So this is kind of guiding, rather than using my classical conversations as my guide to what science we're studying. This is more like my guide. They're going to do their own little workbook, and I'm still going to be reading out of the various different God's designs. So we have some weather and water, and heat and energy, and I think there might have been maybe one other book. I didn't in-depth look through which ones. That's going to take a little bit more planning on my part, making sure that I find the appropriate lesson for out of my God's design to correspond with what they're going to be reading about on their own, if that makes sense. So that covers everything. That is our together family time learning. We have our Bible, we have our science, we have our history, and we have a little bit of geography and read alouds. So if you guys have any questions about anything, if you would like to see something a little bit more in depth, I know that I flew through some of those things. So if you'd like to see something a little bit more in depth, and I can also keep you updated on how these things are going throughout the year. Like I said, a lot of this stuff is new. I'm excited about it, but it is new, and so I don't have an exact idea how it's all going to work out and how it's going to fit for our family. So I will keep you posted. So if you guys have any questions, as always, I'm happy to answer them. And until next time, guys, have a super blessed day.